to Sean's thoughts. In this present moment of now, I share my tops from atop of a mountain, interestingly enough. Yeah, today I was struggling to perhaps get out and do what I'm guided to do. I kept having a numerous amount of thoughts go through my head about different places that I could go locally and different things I could do. And yet, when I left today, actually, I got in my car and I went and got gas. And, well, I was going in the direction that I thought I would be going into and finding somewhere else. And yet, after putting a little bit of gas in my tank, and I say a little bit because the gas over in my province is quite extremely high. Interestingly enough, when I see on the news and I see how much in America the gas is per gallon, I realize that the gas in actual my province of British Columbia, Canada, is much higher than that per liter or, per rate of however that you measure gas. And anyway, so after I put a little bit of gas in the car, I ended up turning a completely different direction. And amazingly enough, driving to my car, to a place that I'd never actually hiked around. And I got out of the car and I just started walking, and this is where I ended up, on top of a mountain or a mountainous region overlooking Golden Ears. I guess in a sense I can see the Alouette Lake image of the Garibaldi mountain range. That video that I took called that the Gates of Garibaldi, that particular view I can see from where I'm at right now. And yeah, I decided to fly my drone around, and yeah, I wasn't really overly interested in flying my drone. Actually, you see, yesterday my beloved cat passed away. I had known for a pretty long time that she was getting thinner and thinner, and then actually 4 days ago she stopped eating, having the desire to eat at all, and she began to get a lot thinner, as I just repeatedly mentioned. And well, yesterday she finally decided it was time to depart our realm. And yeah, it's been a hard 24 hours. My cat's been with me for the last 17, 18 years. And I say my cat, but I really do mean the family cat. And although my former partner chose to go on her own way, I still found it to be the family cat. And, she was loved by my son, my turtles, my dog, or our turtles and our dog, and even my former wife. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of different reflections. You see, I recognize that things always happen for a reason, and they happen with, you can call it divine timing if you'd like, and that's essentially what I do. I've known for a very long time that my journey would take me far from perhaps where I live currently, which is Maple Ridge. And yet my cat, or our cat, her name was Xiao Mao, and Xiao is representative, or the Chinese word for little. So my cat was actually called Xiao Mao, which means little cat in Mandarin. And so Xiao Mao had no real intention of ever going anywhere else. And I've known that for a very long time. It's funny, often I would open my eyes moments as I woke up, and then suddenly my cat would start meowing as if it had psychic abilities to know that moment when my eyes started opening. And of course, I always assumed it would be, or she would be meowing for food, and generally she was. She was always wanting to eat. She's always wanting to eat. Very similar to my son, and actually very similar to Garfield. And Garfield was, or is, one of my favorite animated characters of all times. Not only does Garfield always want to eat, Garfield wants to eat lasagna, and I love lasagna as well. And so, yeah, yesterday was very challenging as I said goodbye to my beloved Xiao Mao. Yeah, But as I was talking about divine timing, Xiao Mao never liked to leave the apartment that we lived in. She didn't even want to go into the hallways or the corridors. And whenever she accidentally fell off the patio, or actually she probably jumped off, you never know. But moments later, I'd find her in a tree, like she would panic and, want to find someplace safe. She didn't prefer anywhere other than being in the apartment. And you can kind of say that she's the one. It was really her apartment because she stayed there for over a decade every day. And so, well, my bedroom was mine, the rest of the apartment was hers. And so, yeah, I wish Xiao Mao farewell. And, you know, it's challenging not to have those beloved animals there within our lives. And when they depart and they move on their way, it's challenging at times to see that perhaps they are continuing on their journey. And I say perhaps, and yet I have a fundamental faith within me that when things leave our, you can say, 3D dimension in the past, they were never truly gone. They always, in a sense, stayed near us. Their energies, their essence, I'm not sure what the word is yet. There is a considerable world that's outside of our natural perception or our programmed limitations of perception, I've often referred to it as. And that would lead to that a lot of the beings that choose to move on. And from my understanding, death is a choice, not necessarily a choice that we all consciously make. Yet, I've been learning about permissions and different things that were manipulated in order to get us to do what they wanted to. And one of those things was for us to choose our death. And I'll leave that whole conversation for another day, and perhaps one day we'll further explore that. Or, of course, you can always, go over to YouTube and listen to the free GIA reports. And there's an awful lot of talking about that right now. Nonetheless, divine timing, back to that. I knew, like, and I say knew as in know, as in my cat told me that she wasn't leaving and that she would stay there with me as my guardian, as our guardian, until the timing was perfect. And I guess, in a sense, the timing was perfect. Actually, in the past several weeks, she used to do this very interesting thing of leaving her body, meaning that if you've ever seen an animal, or, well, an animal anyways, that has passed away, there's emptiness in the eyes and the body is somewhat stiff. And funny enough, or maybe funny is not the right word, but I would often find my cat lying in different places with that same look in her eyes and not moving. Sometimes there wouldn't even be breathing, and I would pet or stroke the cat and it wouldn't move. And several times I was alarmed because I had thought she had finally passed because, like I said, I've known, or been seeing the different aspects of, old age and such. And she was old, yes. But yet in these occurrences, it would take about maybe 90 seconds actually one time where I was stroking her and it felt as if she had passed, and yet suddenly there was animation back in her body as if it went from an empty body and then, an alarm went off and the cat came back to not life, but animated life. And so, yeah, I think that there was definitely an agreement that she would stay until the very last possible moment. And if you have been following those global intelligence agents reports, you would be aware that many things are changing. Or if you listen to other people such as Carrie Kay, or I found this other channel recently called Alobar, and he has some pretty interesting insights. And there are actually a considerable amount of different social media presence on YouTube that are all in alignment that things have changed, that we have been in a almost like an eternal war for a very long time, and yet this so-called war has, as of my understanding, as of April 1st, or perhaps sometime recently, maybe it wasn't April 1st, but this war between, we'll call it good and evil, has finally been concluded. And interestingly enough, the videos that I listened to or observed from the personality known as Alobar actually claim to be in conversations with these beings called the Archons. And the Archons were all the way back to the Anunnaki or the Sumerian, maybe even before the Sumerian times, these beings of great immense power that were perhaps viewed upon by the local populations as godlike creatures simply because they had phenomenal abilities. See, when people are observe others from wherever they come from and they see something that they're unable to explain, oftentimes from, even any type of movie, such as even the recent Star Trek movie that I was watching, when this Aboriginal or this tribal type of community sees a starship, that they suddenly revere that starship as some sort of deity. And that's how these Anunnaki perhaps were viewed upon back in the ancient times. And ancient, I really do mean ancient. Anyway, so back to divine timing. I've often been talking about how I wanted to get out and be like Ash Ketchum in the Pokemon series and with my son and travel around and having adventures and meeting people and doing all these different projects. And yet at the same time, I recognize that, my beloved Xiao Mao wouldn't go with me, like that it wasn't her desire to live amongst the forest. She liked the conveniences of being given food all the time. Yes, she would occasionally kill a mouse. She's done that 3 or 4 times in the last couple years. Yet she was definitely a kept cat, and she liked the convenience of food and water constantly just appearing out of nowhere. And she eventually recognized where the food was stored in the cupboard, so she would often coax me to go back to the cupboard. And she had an amazing different varieties of tactics to get what she wanted. And nonetheless, all of that didn't connect to living out in nature or on the road. And so while I would choose to be on the road again, backpacking around the world as I had once done before, you know, my cat, even if we went in an RV, probably wouldn't choose to live in that, considering the fact that an RV would be very, very, very small. So thank you for sharing your time and attention with me. I'm looking at this bird right now and it's flying through the sky. I'm not sure which frame or which portion of the frame is being caught by the camera. Nonetheless, yeah, we're looking at a lot of beautiful evergreens, and I've never been here before. I've lived here all this time, and although it took me only half an hour to hike over to this area and to sit upon this peak almost, I'm actually sitting on very old rock covered in moss. Yeah, it's extremely beautiful. Actually, I'm seeing this beautiful frame right now that perhaps I will see if I can record for a do no thing. It's still water, but the algae has created a really beautiful, beautiful image. We'll see if the camera will pick it up after. Nonetheless, as I was saying, so my cat waited until the very last moment, and interestingly enough, she waited until the day after that the April 6th GIA report came through that was concluding that God has decided that the war is over. And what war we're talking about, at least as what this information is relaying to me, and keep in mind the things that I share with you are things that I have received myself, not necessarily that I'm reporting what I know to be true. I'm simply reporting what I have been made aware of. And what I was made aware of is oftentimes in different holy texts and different biblical stuff and, revelations and all this other stuff. I'm not sure how to quote it properly, but there's always been a talk about an eternal battle of good versus evil. And although this battle has truly been false light versus false dark in their biblical battle of good versus evil, nonetheless, it's captivated and essentially entrenched the world in a never ending cycle or loop, you could say, of constant fighting, constant amping up the energies and essentially perhaps even concluding with natural resets and whether they were natural or they were caused to be natural. Nonetheless, we seem to have been entrenched in this constant conflict. And well, apparently it's over. Apparently we've concluded that whole chain of events, and now we are sitting in the midst of the beginnings of something that we Homo sapiens have perhaps never been involved in, or we've never had the opportunity. Because in the former past, they would, should we have gotten this far in our awakening, they would essentially reset the populations. And actually, interestingly enough, I've mentioned this before that I wrote a movie script. It's actually a full length movie script. It's fully written. So if we have any production companies out there that want to, make a movie, I've got a couple of them. And this particular one was a story about this woman who had accidentally lost her memory only to find out that she is the commander of a group of Mayan people who at the last essentially ascension point were able to escape, and they were tasked with preserving humanity essentially from themselves, that humanity had gotten to a point where they had caused a lot of natural catastrophes, and that there was a mandate essentially put up that there needed to be a control, and when things got too much there would be a reset. And that kind of aligns with this information that I've received through those reports, that we have went through major resets in the past. From my understanding, our current version of Homo sapien is seventh generation, meaning, at least for me, that in the past there has been six other generations of what we call Homo sapien, or perhaps a variation thereof, of us. And that in the past we've had different situations where the populations of our planet have been reset. And Noah's flood is the easiest one, or the most memorable one that comes to most people's minds, that, the story's told that God didn't like what was going on. Yet I believe God to be a benevolent, loving being who would never, in my opinion, or my faith as well, ever do something like the flood. There must have been other, you know, circumstances to allow for that, and perhaps other beings that posed, like I had mentioned, the Anunnaki, as gods, and therefore perhaps the story is written about them. I've also heard the story about the fall of the Tower of Babel or something like that, where, the society had gotten to an immense point in time of their evolution, and that they were then strucken down and dispersed all over the planet. Now, that could also be, for instance, Atlantis being a Homo sapien civilization, perhaps far more than that, maybe a galactic civilization that used to exist on this planet. You know, it's interesting when there are so many people who believe the fairy tales that they're told, and yet the actual history that's written all over the planet, from these ancient fossils to, you know, foreign technologies and foreign architecture that's all over the world. There's as if there is so much evidence, and yet, we dismiss it. And yeah, with divine timing, I recognize that while I wanted to go out and see all of these different monuments and different things out there, I had the opportunity actually one time to sleep outside the temples in Tikal, and that's in Guatemala, just a little close to the border of Belize. And to actually sleep among that energy and among that history is amazing. And yet, like I said, I would never see my cat getting on an airplane and flying anywhere. Although, with the possibility of more of our ability returning to being an ability, perhaps there will be an easier way to get to where I'm going. So, yeah, I wish my Xiao Mao farewell, and I love her so much. So many amazing memories I've had with her. And as I said before, there's more than a possibility that perhaps she's even sitting here staring out at this world with me. And maybe that's what guided me here, because it's been a long time that she's only seen the interior of our apartment, or at least from the 3D perspective. When we go to sleep, who knows? Perhaps cats are flying like Superman as well. And maybe this was one of her favorite places to morph into a larger cat and go crawling through the forest. Who truly knows? Well, I have faith of it, anyways. So, yes, thank you for sharing this short memorial of my cat Xiao Mao with me, and seeing this amazing mountaintop view. And I've truly been blessed to sit amongst this ancient rock that I'm sitting upon right now. And as I said, I'm gonna get back to everything, including creating more of my Do No Thing videos. So I highly encourage, as always, to share, comment, whatever it is you'd like to do. Yet, the more that we connect, however it is that we connect, and I mean we as in the planet of Homo sapiens, the more that we do, regardless if even you have been, we'll call it, contaminated with this system that was set up in order to herd all the cattle, and the cattle being the Homo sapiens. Even if you are part of that, things can change. We can move forward, and we can find a solution. And that's what I was most fascinated by with the talk with Alobar, in that he was trying to find solutions to perhaps move forward at a more expedited rate. And so if you ever have that chance to go over and look at that, there's two videos that are called Conversations with Archons. And, it's definitely something to ponder and to consider, because even if it's not deemed a possibility with us and them, it's definitely something that all of the Homo sapiens on this planet can consider, and honestly should consider, with relations to each of us within our communities, within our own provinces, our own nations, and the overall planet ourselves. If we could get an immense amount of people just switching over to, you know, following that gut instinct within you to take that turn, make that decision, do that thing that benefits everyone rather than benefits the few. So, anyways, I recognize that, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, have a wonderful day, and I'll just let the video run for a few seconds, and so much love. Thank you for sharing your attention and your support with me.